Back with us on the SportsMax Zone, we kick off the program with news from Trinidad and Tobago that delegates from the country's football association, the TTFA, have voted to accept FIFA's installation of a normalization committee. The decision received the support of 33 of the delegates at Sunday's emergency general meeting of the TTFA. 3 delegates did not respond to the call to vote, while another 2 abstained. Sunday's meeting came just 2 days after the Court of Appeal in TNT ruled that the TTFA acted outside its power. It acted ultra-vires when it resorted to a local court to challenge FIFA's imposition of a normalization committee. Now, the delegates also voted to cease all legal action against FIFA. Meanwhile, FIFA has welcomed the last Friday's decision of the TNT Court of Appeal to strike out the ruling of the TNT High Court. The High Court had ruled that FIFA acted unlawfully when it disbanded the duly elected executive of the TTFA and installed a normalization committee. In a release, FIFA said, FIFA welcomes the decision of the TNT Court of Appeal, which ruled that the former leadership of the TNTFA had acted out unlawfully by appealing to a local court to contest the appointment of a normalization committee. Among other relevant legal considerations, the Court of Appeal stressed that in accordance with the TTFA statutes and FIFA statutes, the Court of Arbitration for Sport is the proper forum to resolve such disputes. A normalization committee was installed in TNT by a decision of the FIFA Council. After it was established, the former leadership engaged in various acts of serious mismanagement. Now, from the outset, this program has been saying that William Wallace's TTFA was being hypocritical in challenging FIFA over rules that it, the TTFA, had also imposed on its own members. To prove the point, we have obtained a copy of one such document signed by one club this year. Let's have a look. So, it's a Trinidad and Tobago Association legal declaration that must be submitted as part of the application for a TTFA club license. It recognizes rather as legally binding the statutes, rules, and regulations and decisions of FIFA. Just focus on A and C, the sections that are highlighted, that the red boxes around. Forget the rest. A. So it says that legally binding statutes, rules, and regulations and decisions of FIFA. Then C. It recognizes the prohibition on recourse to ordinary courts under the FIFA statutes and the CONCACAF statutes. Now, that's what we've been saying all along, and that's what other observers have been saying all along, that we understand that you feel hard done by William Wallace and your executive by the way that you were removed from office after only 4 months or less than that. But the same thing that you're saying FIFA can't do, even though you are a member, it's the same thing that you have asked your members, your delegates, to abide by. You've said to your members, you can only resolve disputes with us through the Court of Arbitration for Sport or to a tribunal of our choosing that we have agreed to. You cannot go to the local courts. Yet, when FIFA says you cannot go to a local court, you have to go to the Court of Arbitration for Sport or to a tribunal that we've agreed to, you say, no, it's not working. So we were saying, but how could any court side with you on that score? The High Court did, Justice Carol Gobin did, and it was a victory celebrated far and wide by members of United TTFA. But then the TNT High Court delivered a ruling on Friday that made clear that that ruling by Justice Gobin was flawed. The challenge of the normalization committee, that should have never have developed to the stage it did. And specifically, if we go to page 10 of the summary of decision from the TNT Court of Appeal, it says that it started with the way the documents were served on FIFA. Yeah, were served on FIFA. It says the purported service of proceedings by email was in breach of the laws of Switzerland. This is, of course, because FIFA is domiciled in Switzerland. And it says because service of process by email is illegal in Switzerland, any such service is therefore void and therefore a nullity. So the Court of Appeal president and the other justice, Mr. Justice Barrow, who worked on this matter, said that even if you were to go by the way the documents were served on FIFA, where they were of no effect, we could have ended the appeal there and thrown it out on that count, but because out of courtesy, they went on to address some other things. Now, they said, crucially, that Trinidad and Tobago had the option of withdrawing from FIFA. It says on the section on point 29.3, membership of FIFA is voluntary. An association may choose not to join or even to drop out of the FIFA system. Having made its choice and having bound itself by its own constitution to comply with FIFA, the TTFA cannot now act outside of those provisions. The Court of Arbitration is an arbitral panel which specializes in sporting disputes, and that's where you should have gone. So the Court of Appeal ended up telling the TTFA and William Wallace what others have been telling them all along. They celebrated the High Court ruling. It seems as if they have accepted the appeal court's ruling, and the delegates voted on Sunday. Joining us now is a man who has been fighting the corner of those who have been saying this has no place in court. FIFA's statutes are clear. Brent Sancho, he served, of course, as he's a former Minister of Sport in TNT, and he is a club official in the Trinidad Republic as well. Brent Sancho, welcome to the SportsMax Zone again.
Thanks, George, and of course, Lance and Maria, hello, and to all your viewers across the Caribbean.
Right. So 8 months later, we are back at where we started. A lot has happened over those 8 months. We've heard men especially say, the men behind the Youth ID TTFA say, the court would determine what they would do and the court would vindicate them in the way that Fidel Castro said after overthrowing Fulgencio Batista in Cuba, that history will absolve me. When the pressure came crashing down on William Wallace, he said history will absolve him, the court would rule in his favor. Justice Gobin delivered a ruling, Brent Sancho, that was celebrated by United TTFA. I had some personal messages from some leading lights in United TTFA. Those messages weren't complimentary about what they felt we did. But here, the Court of Appeal rules that that ruling by Justice Gobin, null and void, of no effect. This matter should never have gone to a local court. Your perspective on what the justices ruled last Friday?
Well, George, I think to add to what you were saying as it relates to club licensing and what is required by clubs and delegates, whether it be the zones, etc., to be part of the TTFA, even the TTFA's own constitution, Article 67, clearly states that FIFA, CAS, are the governing body as it relates to disputes. And even if you are to go into the Act of Parliament, again, which is in the ruling on Friday, was brought up, even the Act of Parliament in Article 3 suggests and as well mentions the overarching reach of FIFA. And I've said this, and of course on this show as well has argued that fact from the beginning, that this was never a matter for the High Courts of Trinidad and Tobago. It was clearly a matter for CAS. Even within the ruling that we saw on Friday, discussions would have about the fact that FIFA did not pay their half. But there is something like a legal aid within CAS that could have assisted. All in all, it points to the fact that I believe that the United TTFA was wrongly advised in coming here in Trinidad and Tobago to pursue their claim. This has never been about whether or not the United TTFA was wrongly done or not done. This has consistently been about a contract dispute, understanding the laws that govern the governing body, and as well about the fact that the membership of Trinidad and Tobago, who for the first time on Sunday had the opportunity to be heard, and was never heard throughout the 8 months as it relates to this situation. Both happened, one on Friday, of course, with the High Court, with the appeal ruling, and of course, secondly, on Sunday, and both would have shown, of course, emphatically that the United TTFA was wrong in their pursuit in the High Court.
All right. I spoke with Robert Haddad last Friday, Brent, and he said, well, he wasn't in a position to comment just yet because he had to dialogue with FIFA to say, okay, what now is the way forward in the wake of the Court of Appeal's ruling. But he said that the right decision had been made by the court. He welcomed it, and he lamented the aggro that has happened over the past 8 months. So now that the TTFA membership have spoken, they have voted, the normalization committee is being welcomed with open arms. What happens from here? Who's in charge of, well, the meeting? Who chaired Sunday's meeting? Who is effectively leading the loose band that is now the TTFA, even as that body will not have charge of football? It will be the normalization committee, one suspects, and Robert Haddad, who will now take things on from here. Well,
first and foremost, the membership of the TTFA is at the end of the day, the most powerful body in the sport. They are the ones, of course, that elect an executive president, etc. Right now, currently, Trinidad and Tobago is without an executive. In the meeting on Sunday that was chaired by Mr. Richard Ferguson of La Hoqueta Rangers, a professional club here in Trinidad and Tobago, elected by one of the members in the meeting on Sunday. A motion was passed by Mr. Osman Downer, one of the representatives for the Trinidad and Tobago referee, a former FIFA referee as well, and one of the champions as it relates to the putting together of the constitution of the Trinidad and Tobago Football Association, that clearly stated the need to get back in with FIFA, clearly stated, of course, that the membership is ready to acknowledge and accept the normalization committee, and clearly stated, of course, that any other legal proceedings against FIFA is to be dropped immediately. With that motion, it signified, of course, the end of William Wallace's regime. A letter, of course, was then asked to be written by the membership, by Mr. Ferguson and Bonnie Bishop, another official, Miss Bonnie Bishop, another official of the Trinidad and Tobago Referees Association. That letter has been done and has been, of course, circulated among the membership. It has been okayed, and it was sent off this morning. It was, of course, late on lunchtime today in Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Haddad, the head of the Normalization Committee, of course, acknowledged receipt of that letter and said he had sent it off to FIFA. So now here in Trinidad and Tobago, it's a waiting game as to see FIFA's response, hopefully to lift the suspension, and now for the Normalization Committee to start their work that they had intended to start on March 17th.
Yeah. Brent, I want to ask you this question about the response nationally to the developments in the past 3 days. Obviously, the delegates have spoken in a very overwhelming manner. A popular term used in journalism and broadcasting news when you're seeking pertinent information is it depends on who you talk to. Now, in the past couple of weeks, we have had our resource people in Trinidad and Tobago talking to us about this issue, and I struggled to get a sense of how much support the United TTFA had in their war against FIFA, because from where we sat, they looked to be in a huge minority. But at least one resource person suggested to us that, it was hard to answer the question as to the percentage support the United TTFA has or has had in this issue. As I said, the delegates spoke profoundly on this issue, but the mood in Trinidad and Tobago, is this a welcome decision? Is the development over the past 3 days one that is being embraced by the footballing fraternity in TNT, and not just talking about the delegates now?
Well, first and foremost, if you go back to March 17th and a couple of weeks preceding after, United TTFA started a GoFundMe to, of course, take their matter to CAS. In that GoFundMe, and if you are to gauge monies being put in as popularity, they only mustered well below $4,000 US. So that shows you the kind of support or lack of support that they would have had as it relates to a financial, of course, if you equate financial input to popularity. Fast forward through the couple of months, and it was, of course, widely known through the membership that was speaking out that they did not support this court case. We've seen each delegate, zone, etc., speaking out. We've had several individuals who are part and parcel of this situation that spoke out. Of course, in light of some of the misgivings of the Wallace administrations as it relates to the unilateral contracts that were signed, I think that even became even more lopsided. And if you look for international help, because we've heard that the United TTFA used that suggestion that they had support from other countries, other FIFA countries throughout, you struggle to find any newspaper clippings or any international breaking news in some of the major networks outside of the Caribbean talking about this matter. So it would suggest to you, Lance, that the support was always quite zero. What they were very good at, of course, was putting a spin on the misinformation. And of course, they had, for some reason, some of the local journalists here in Trinidad and Tobago was giving them consistently giving them the opportunity to put their side of the story out there. I think once the facts, of course, started to cement and the cries started to dip a bit, you started to see the true reflection of this situation. And I would say throughout the 8 months or so, I would struggle to suggest that they had any time overwhelming support or even half of the membership support. I always felt, and they always were fighting from a position of underdog.
Brent, were you surprised that Wallace, was no part of the EGM on Sunday? And of course, where the name William Wallace is concerned with Trinidad and Tobago football, do you see him competing for any spots moving forward? Do you see him being a part of our local football body?
I think a lot of the membership were disappointed that he did not turn up to the meeting, at least articulate his point or to give his view. It was a situation where he could have, of course, taken part in the meeting as an observer. He didn't need to be an executive or president for that meeting for say. He could have at least shown up to give his side. And I think a lot of the membership have gotten a bit of distaste in their mouth because of the way things have gone about. It always seemed, if you remember, they had an unofficial meeting a couple of weeks back, and again in that unofficial meeting, he was emphatically told that he needs to take the matter out of court. But he's never really had that chance to come out and say, because he didn't want to come out and articulate his point to the membership. So he's always seemed to be standing behind, and again from a media point of view, he seemed to use one source of media to put out his agenda. As it relates to his legacy here in Trinidad and Tobago, I think it would be very hard to suggest that he would have, in terms of history, be absolved or even be looked at as a champion of any cause. It's because of it. It was a very straightforward situation as it relates to the Constitution, as it relates, of course, to the articles in the Act of Parliament in Trinidad and Tobago. And one interesting fact as well, Mariah, in the judgment on Friday, the appeal judges mentioned that even before the Act of Parliament, Trinidad and Tobago was part of FIFA. So what did they do then? Obviously, they understood the statutes that they were under before the Act of Parliament in 1982. Of course, it showed that they, in principle, would have understand what they were getting themselves involved in.
Yeah. Right. So finally now, Brent, it's funny how everything has come full circle. I say to you in closing, because I remember one of the things that David John Williams was accused of in his time as president was acting like an executive president, making decisions by himself without consulting the full membership of the TTFA or even consulting his board of directors and getting the stamp of approval from the board of directors before making decisions. And that was lamented by William Wallace and the United TTFA team. They campaigned on that, saying we need to end this practice. They beat David John Williams. They got a clear mandate, make no mistake about that. The membership favored William Wallace and his team. And one of the things William Wallace said at the outset was that, look, the days of an executive president running TTFA, Trinidad and Tobago's football, are over. The decisions that I make are going to be with the imprimatur of my executive, my board. It will be the membership that will speak and direct all that I do, because that is what Trinidad and Tobago's football needs. And Brent, it's so sad, it may be ironic and sad, it may be other combination of descriptors, that this gentleman finds himself in a position where throughout these 8 months, he has shied away from consulting the full membership of the TTFA. He has shied away from getting their counsel before he has made the big decisions. And even where the board has said, okay, William, do this in this way, he has done it another way, perpetuating the very same things that he held up as sins under the previous administration. And that, for me, is my biggest disappointment with this Wallace stewardship.
Yeah, you're spot on, George. And maybe the writing was on the wall in their campaigning when, of course, the infamous letter from the Junior Sami group here in Trinidad and Tobago that pledged their support, only to find out that that letter, of course, was a forged document, as well as, of course, the suggestions that Nike was going to be an apparel sponsor here in Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, that again was not the full truth. All that happened before the election date, and then going into, of course, office within the first 2 to 3 months, there was reports coming out of unilateral contracts being signed. And in fact, one of the contracts only came to light on this show here on the SportsMax Zone, and only until then was the first time even his closest confidants found out about that contract, and they went so far as to going in the media and distancing themselves from William Wallace. So you're very correct as it relates to, of course, what was promised and what actually transpired. And I think one thing that the Trinidad and Tobago football and membership would have learned from this scenario is that until there are proper structures and governing policies in place, another William Wallace is just around the corner.
Brent Sancho, thank you very much. We'll talk later this week when we do the Champions League. All the best to you.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Good. That's it for that segment. Back with more in the SportsMax Zone. El Clasico. What happened to Barcelona on Saturday, you are asking? Me too.